Most people setting up LLCs in 2025 are making costly mistakes, and the reason is simple: they are just following outdated advice that ignores the international side of things. So whether you are a US citizen dreaming of going global or an international entrepreneur trying to enter the US market, your LLC strategy needs to be different from what you usually hear on YouTube. Because if you choose the wrong structure or file it incorrectly, you could pay double taxes, pay more taxes than necessary, or miss out on crucial banking opportunities. And we have helped hundreds of clients set up LLCs both in the US and internationally, specializing in cross-border taxation. And after years of seeing the same expensive mistakes again and again, I'm going to walk you through exactly how to set things up correctly. And this video will take under 10 minutes, and here's the plan. We will talk about choosing the right state for your LLC, picking the right address, and staying compliant with tips and tricks for both US citizens and also non-residents. So why does the state you choose really matters? Isn't an LLC just an LLC? So for Americans based inside the US, the short answer is you usually set up your LLC in the state where you live, so that's quite straightforward. But for non-residents like Tom from Germany, Samuel from Spain, or Antonio from Italy, the state choice becomes actually quite critical. So that's where private states like Wyoming or Delaware come into play. And we usually recommend Wyoming over Delaware, and here's why. So Wyoming lists your business address, which makes banking quite easy or easier. For example, it helps when opening a relay fee account. The ownership stays private, the state is fast and responsive, and overall it's one of the smoothest jurisdictions for non-residents. So if privacy is important for you, or if you want the least friction when dealing with banks, Wyoming is definitely the go-to option. Now there are exceptions. If you fly to the US often, it might make sense to register where you actually travel. Fly to Atlanta every month. A Georgia LLC could be easier for in-state banking. If you are always in Miami, a Florida LLC may help with local banks also. But here's what we have actually seen in practice. So you don't need a Florida LLC to open a Miami bank account, for example. And many of our Wyoming LLC clients have successfully opened accounts in Miami with Chase, Citi, and Bank of America, for example. Also, the downside of a Florida LLC is public ownership. Your name is basically visible. The upside is that some banks open accounts a bit more easily. So if you don't care about privacy and spend time in Florida, it can still make sense for you. So setting up an LLC is actually a quite easy part. The challenge always, especially as a non-resident, is getting a business bank account. And that's where the address you actually use becomes critical. Let's clear this up. So every LLC needs a so-called registered agent address, but you can't use this for regular mail or banking. And then you need a business address, so that's what actually matters for banks. For non-residents, your banking options are quite limited. You don't have hundreds of fintech options like Americans, and you have got maybe 5 or 6 good online banks, and Mercury being one of the key ones. But here's the catch. So if your business address looks like a typical mail forwarding address, banks essentially flag it. They know these addresses, and once they've seen the same one like 20, 30 or 40 times or even more, they actually stop accepting it. So what's the solution for this? We maintain a database of non-CMRA addresses, so essentially addresses that aren't flagged, and that's what we give our clients access to, usually for much less than $1,000 a year. Some providers charge for virtual offices. For Americans, my advice is don't use your home address. You don't want your personal address tied to your business. Instead, pay for a proper business address with mail forwarding, and this simply keeps things cleaner, safer, and more professional. Let's talk about the difference between a single member and a multi-member LLC now. So this part trips up a lot of non-resident, and a single member LLC is treated as a so-called disregarded entity, and the LLC itself doesn't pay corporate tax, and instead everything flows through to you. So if you don't have a tax residency anywhere, that could essentially mean 0% tax on your personal level. And the multi-member LLC on the other side is taxed as a so-called partnership, and this essentially means more paperwork, but in some cases it's actually what you want. For example, if Antonio from Italy and Andres from Spain start a business together, a multi-member LLC makes more sense. Or if you are running a business alone but you need a W-9 form for platforms like Amazon, for example, you might add a family member as a 1% owner just to qualify as a multi-member LLC. So it sounds small, but choosing between single member and multi-member LLC can completely change your compliance requirements. Now for the part people love to ignore, it's compliance. If you are a non-resident with a single member LLC, you have to file Form 5472 with a Proforma 1120, and that's due April 15th. Even if you opened your LLC on December 31st, for example, so at the end of the year, if there was a related party transaction, you have to file it. If you skip it, the IRS can fine you with up to 25,000 USD. If you have a multi-member LLC on the other side, you need to file a partnership return, and here the due date is March 15th. And missing these deadlines is one of the most common and most expensive mistakes we always see. So if you are thinking about setting up an LLC, whether you are a US citizen or a non-resident, check the link in the description, and there you will find our free form to get started and also more resources on structuring your business the right way. And if you found the video helpful, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next one. So to recap, you have to choose the right state in the beginning, and we usually recommend Wyoming. You have to use the right business address for banking, and you have to decide carefully between single and multi-member LLCs. And of course, you have to stay compliant with IRS deadlines and get those steps right, and you avoid the costly mistakes most people are still making in 2025.